Hello, hello, Hannah. Welcome to the Mentally a Badass podcast. I'm so happy to have you today.
It's great to be here. Thank you for asking me.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm excited to get into today's topic. We're going to be talking about PTSD and how we're going to have a different outlook. So I'm excited to get into it. So in every Mentally Badass episode, we're going to start by going deep into your past so we can get to know you better. So you do have a story regards to PTSD. So let's get into that.
So it actually was my college years, so early 20s, and I was mugged three times. So being mugged once is horrendous enough, but three times. So I can tell you about each one briefly. The first one was when I was in college, and this is the early 80s. So I just turned 60, so this is a long time ago. But I was a punk rocker, if you can imagine me with dreadlocks and a Mohican, and going to gigs and music was everything, for us at that time. So I was in a concert. My boyfriend was actually playing at the gig, and we were having a great time dancing. And then a young man who I never knew who he was, he wanted to dance with me, and he started putting his hands where he shouldn't, and I
Mm.
pushed him away. And the next thing I remember was his hand on the back of my head, and he smashed my head into a concrete pillar on
Oh
the
my
side of the
God.
dance floor. Fractured my skull. I can put my finger on it right here. It feels different, where the bone knitted back together again. I know
Yeah.
you can't see it, but I can put my finger right on it. So when that happened, I was only out cold for seconds probably, but I came to, and my head is a different shape, and I couldn't see. I could only see like an inch in front of my face. I lost my eyesight for about 24, 48 hours. So I crawled on my hands and knees through the crowd to the back of the room because a friend of ours was mixing the sound at the back of the room on the mixing desk. And I thought, at least he'll be sober, he'll know what to do. Even with a fractured skull and major concussion, I was kind of thinking. And he leapt across the bar, got a bucket of ice, put it on my head, threw me in a taxi, and they got me to the emergency room. And they actually had to tie me down in 4-point restraints on the table because I couldn't see and I was panicking. If I'd rolled around, they couldn't do an x ray. If I'd fallen off the table, I would have hurt myself more. So I was actually tied down in 4-point restraints, which is
Wow.
traumatic in itself.
Yeah.
So being tied down, I can't see, my head's a different shape. But I recovered from that one pretty, healed up, and I got on with my life. I finished college. And then the next one was, this is all happening in Manchester in the north of England. And the next one was about 3 years later when I was walking home near to where I'd lived for the last few years. And three men came out of the dark behind me and slammed me on the ground and beat the living daylights out of me. I thought I was going to die. They were kicking and punching me with such force that, like, two of them were holding me down and the other one was like trying to, I think they were looking for money, but they were kicking me in the
Mm.
head. I was screaming. I could remember the air running out of my lungs, and I thought, if I can't catch another breath, I'm going to die. If they have a
Mm.
knife, I'm going to die. And they ran off, left me there, and I recovered from that one. And then I moved down to London to start working in the theatre. I had a big career in theatre and then TV, then movies. And I just started working in the theatre, and I was riding my bicycle home from the theatre about 10 o'clock at night. And I saw this young boy, he was about 16, and I noticed he was on a really small child's bike, which I remember thinking that was weird. And the next thing I knew, he got off the bike and he flung it at my head. So I was riding really fast this way.
My
So it
God.
was like, bam! It was like being shot out of a cannon at a brick wall. The impact was in, and I took the impact in my neck and shoulders, and he actually broke my neck. Thank God, not the spinal cord, but
Yeah.
C2 and C3, the vertebrae right underneath your skull, were cracked through. Yeah, so as these things went on, I mean, I'm just telling you the injuries, the emotional part of it, I'm terrified to leave the house, even after the second one, so when the third one happened, it was, I had the story in my head that if I leave the house, I'm going to get hurt because
Yeah,
that's my
because
spirit, right?
it
I
was
had police
your
reports
brain's
and x.
conditioned.
Yeah, I had police reports and x-rays to prove that the world is a very scary, dangerous place. I knew that if I left the house and say a bus went out of control in central London, I'm the one it would have run over. That's where my head was at after the third one. So yeah, so that all happened within a 7 or 8 year period. Those three events.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask you, like, what was like the time frame? Was it like every year, every like 2 years?
It's
Because
every two, like it's a bit of a blur because obviously at the time I wasn't doing well, and I don't really keep records. But if I think about where I was and where I was living, it was about every 2 or 3 years that these things happened.
My goodness. Yeah, when I talk to people about events that they go through like that are tragic, I've never heard a story where it was like 3 times, like multiple, like not 2 times, 3 times. That's, oh my goodness. I'm so sorry you had to go through that. And we're definitely going to get into, the emotional, more deep into the emotional side of it. Because, if it was, I'm just how to, I like to put myself in like the position, which obviously I'm never ever going to know how the actual, like, how you actually felt. But like, I think about like psychologically, it's like if this all this stuff's happened to you, you're definitely gonna view the world as something that's like dangerous and scary. Like, did you go to like different countries? Have you been like to the US and such and have just assumed everywhere you go, even where you travel, you could potentially get mugged or like it's just a bad place? Like, did you have that mindset?
I did up until I did. I probably had. See, this is in the 80s. The PTSD was only recognized as a diagnosis around that time. So where I was living, in basically my treatment was a cup of tea, suck it up and walk it off. That was the treatment I got, right? So I got pretty twisted in my thinking. I would say about 10 years of what it probably would have been called PTSD in terms of being frightened to leave the house, frightened to, I did actually go to America the first time in between the second and third one briefly,
Mm-hmm.
but it was after the third one, it was just hard getting out of the house, let alone going anywhere else. But I do not have that thought now, and I haven't had that thought for probably 20 years. I got well. I'm a absolute believer in that you can recover from these things. I am not damaged, or I don't need fixing anymore, because I now understand how my mind was working then and how it works now. Before I didn't understand, and so I suffered as a result
Yeah.
of that. And
Yeah.
now I understand that I don't have to suffer from it because it's not
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. It's not, you went through a traumatic event, and at the time you may feel you're broken like crap. That's how I'm gonna be the rest of my life. I'm screwed, right? But no, you're right. You just have to go through the healing process, and that's just super important. Why I talk about this on the podcast is because a lot of people would just have the acceptance that my life is all screwed up. Let's just stay screwed up forever until I'm in the grave. But I like having people like you who have been through hell and are doing fantastic right now. But I do want to ask real quick, did you live in the same town or area when this was happening, or did you move somewhere else? I feel like I would have like moved somewhere else after like the second mug.
Yeah, I did move after the second one. So the first two happened in Manchester, and then I moved down to London. But I moved to London as much to start working in the theatre as I did to. I wasn't getting away from it because to me it wasn't where I was living, and I didn't know the people who'd done it to me.
Yeah.
It was just life. The world was a scary place. So wherever you go, it's going to be difficult.
Yeah, yeah. The reason I asked that because in the US, at least the culture with us or where I grew up in, it's always don't go to this town, it's a bad area. That's what we would say. We wouldn't view every single town. It's like
Right.
if you go to Harlem, you associate Harlem in
Right.
New York. Oh,
Yeah.
you're gonna get mugged. That's how we were taught. So I was wondering if that
Yeah.
mindset was the same over there.
No. In fact, the opposite. Like I was a punk. We were like living. I was living in squats and living on the edge. It was a very different time. In fact, when I lived in America for 16 years. I lived in Los Angeles
Okay.
for 16 years because I was working in the film business.
Yes.
But that first time I went there before I moved, I remember my friend I was staying with. We'd gone out drinking, and he had a bicycle he'd left at the back of the bar, and he'd gone off with some girl. So he said, "Oh, you can ride my bike home." I'm like, "Okay." So I start riding the bike, and I've only been there like 3 days. I got jet lag. I've never been in America before. And I started riding my bike, and it's block after block after block. And I was thinking, I'm sure I should have met the beach by now. I was actually going inland.
Yeah.
I rode my bike into South Central LA at 2 o'clock in the morning. And so I stopped at a 7-Eleven to ask this lady, like, isn't the beach around here? And she looked at me, she's like, honey, get in a cab right now.
Oh
I was like, okay.
my
Yeah, so
god.
I've been in a lot of situations that, would be regarded as dangerous. But I think then I didn't, it wasn't, that was never a concern. That's
Mhm.
life. If you want to go out and live a life, you're gonna get into trouble sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And you said that this was like around like the 80s time, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, yeah, like that actually makes sense. Like thinking time frame, maybe for me, I was born in '95, and I grew up, the 2000s and such. So
Yeah,
it could have just been a
it's very
different
different.
time where they're
It's
more
very
like,
different.
okay, don't go here and don't talk to strangers, or like, yeah. So that totally makes sense. Were you with anybody when you got mugged? Or were you just always by yourself?
I was in a crowd the first time with the dancing in the nightclub, but the other two times now I was on my own.
Wow, the first one, geez, they really just risk it all there. Did anyone get like arrested for what they did to you?
No, the second one, like I didn't know who the person was who did the first one.
Mhm.
The second one, I did actually go to the police station because I wanted them to know what was happening.
Mhm.
And this was actually made it much worse was that I went to the police station to make a statement and just getting out of my house at that time, like my ears were really bashed up, earrings were ripped out of my ears. I probably had internal bruising. I was a bit of a mess. And I dragged myself to the police station, and my head was screaming at me, if you leave the house, they're going to kill you.
Oh my
2 days ago,
god.
when you left the
Yeah,
house,
I
you
could
almost died. So I've got this screaming going on in my head, but I was determined the police should know. And I was shown into a room to give a statement. And this detective was sat across the table from me. He wrote everything down and he said, "Well, we know who did it." And I'm like, "What?" And I said, "Yeah, but, he's just writing," was he saying. He says, "Yeah, but we got, more important things to do." He literally said that to me. I mean,
wait, by those words?
if it had been okay to reach across the table and grab this policeman by the neck, I would have done it. I was very tempted
You
because
got beat up? It's fine. We got better things to do.
he's like, we're dealing with, burglaries and murders and stuff like that. It was a very rough part of the city. It really compounded that feeling of isolation and hopelessness, and nobody cares. And I think after that, I went home and I didn't leave the house for a long time, apart from like very, like getting food or something. And I couldn't sleep. I think today they'd call it self harm, but we didn't know that word back then. But I was
Yeah.
punching the wall
Huh.
in absolute anger and frustration, and I'd wake up the next morning with my hands all bruised and swollen, and then I'd hide them. It was almost like I wanted someone to know how much pain I was in. I mean, my friends were amazing at first, when you had injuries and they heard what happened,
Yeah.
but then they move on to the next drama, and the emotional pain, which is on the inside that people couldn't see, and especially back then, nobody was really talking about this stuff. I got very strange. I say I wasn't sleeping properly. I wasn't eating. I was like punching the wall in anger and then hiding my hands so that nobody could see the bruises. And this went on for about a year. And when it came up, that's when I moved, because it came up to about a year. Like an anniversary sounds like the wrong expression, but you know what I mean? It was like a year later. And
Mhm.
that's when I decided to move. I thought Manchester is clearly the problem. I've got to move. Yeah.
My god. It's so crazy how, I mean, our world when it comes to mental health is so different now. So if this were to happen, there would be a lot more resources and such. Just like this one, like, for all we know, there could be someone here that got mugged. Like, when I put the title, it's gonna definitely have somewhere in there SEO wise. But I'm trying to like take everything in because it's just you've been through so much. And then just I was just gonna ask you how your sleeping was, how your mental health was, because it's gonna all come, catch up to you. And so I think I want to ask here, when you felt that anger, was it because people weren't listening to you? I want to see what that trigger point was.
See, it's interesting for me to talk about it now because I have a completely different perspective of it now. I don't even
Hmm.
like the word trigger.
Okay.
Right? I can explain why.
Okay.
I mean, oh, right, yeah, I'll explain now. Because what I understand now is nothing on the outside of me can make me feel anything. The
Hmm.
anger I was feeling was a reaction to the thinking, the very low mood thinking I got into, which is, it's not a judgment. It's understandable that if you've been through this violence and you're kind of on your own and you're dealing with it, because I don't mean on my own, but like I was living on my own. So like you spend a lot of time on your own, especially if you're not leaving the house. And so I was spiraling into a lower and lower mood, listening to that thinking. See, the event itself, if I think about it, the events themselves lasted maybe seconds or 2 minutes tops. Even when those men were beating me up, it couldn't have lasted more than 2 minutes. I had an out of body experience, so it felt a lot longer. That's just a coping mechanism we all have to protect ourselves from things like that. But the suffering, like the 10 years of suffering afterwards, which now would be called PTSD, that was coming from me reliving and reliving the thinking in my head, reliving the event, reliving like the policeman's reactions, some of my friends' reactions, how I was coping that day. Life is hopeless, life is pointless. Why bother? I get myself up and I just get knocked down again. So these stories were going round and round in my head, and I innocently was listening to them and believing them. But
Yeah.
what I know now, and I trained as a trauma counselor, I've been doing that work for the last 20, 30 years now, is that we're always feeling our thinking. We live in a thought created world, no matter what we've been through.
Yeah.
So it's never the outside circumstances that are creating our feeling. It's understandable when you've been through something like that to be so disturbed and distressed about it,
Yeah.
but it's actually not automatic. So triggered would imply something on the outside of me is creating this feeling, and it doesn't work that way. That's what I know now.
Interesting. Can you tell me more about that so I can
Yeah.
learn?
Yeah. So imagine you watching a movie or a sports event or concert or something with your friend or your partner. Now, one of you could be loving it and the other one could be hating it or just bored, right? So
Hmm.
therefore, it can't be the movie or the sports that are creating that experience, because which one of you is right? You're both having your own thought created experience about the entertainment. Therefore, it can't be the outside thing, the movie, the sports, whatever it is, that's creating the experience, because you're having different experiences in the same situation. And one of my favorite research books, it's called Differences in Response to Traumatic Situations, something like that. It's written by Marilyn Bowman. I can give you the full title. But it's a small book, it's a research book, and she lists hundreds of very dramatic, traumatic kind of situations and describes how not everybody in that situation had the same response.
Hmm.
So there is no automatic response. I don't even like the D part of PTSD, post traumatic, because even calling it a disorder is implying that there's something wrong with me now,
Hmm.
right? Here I am, the innocent victim, and now I've got a mental illness. How did that work? Right? It makes no sense to me now, right? So
Yeah.
when I'm working with clients, the first thing I want to say to them is there is nothing wrong with you. You are not broken. You don't need fixing. Even if our bodies are damaged, even if we're reliving the event, the me inside, that me that was screaming to stay alive,
Hmm.
cannot be broken. Whether you
Hmm.
call it spirit, soul, essence, I don't care what you call it, but there's a inner part of us that is resilience. Like you don't have to put resilience in from the outside. We are resilient. And the only reason I wasn't feeling resilient for those years afterwards was because I innocently was listening to the scary thinking. But scary thinking is a story. I was actually safe. I just didn't think I was.
Yeah. So I have a couple of questions that I want to
Yeah.
still dive deeper into the whole word of trigger, because that word is said a lot in the mental health world. So I just want to have like more of an understanding. So people say, and also like from my experience and such, is that certain things like smell or sounds and such can trigger them back to an event. So and another thing too is like, for example, people who were at war. Like I've interviewed a couple people who have PTSD from war. Like they get anxious and they when it has like fireworks and such. Like, so what will you have to say to like people who experience that?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely can be chain reactions, and that's how the brain works. The brain works on things like prediction, like association, repetition. Remember when you were a little kid and you're learning how to ride a bicycle or write your name? Repetition is how the brain then starts to learn things. Now, that's great when you're learning something, but when we repeat scary memories or scary thoughts, the brain's then making an association. So it's still not the event that's doing that. It's my thought in each moment that's doing that. Now I have a friend who was severely injured in combat. He was a medic in a unit that was ambushed, and all his buddies were killed. And as the medic, he's running around trying to help people. He lost his eye, and exactly that happened. What you explained. He went to Spain for a vacation with his buddies. They come out of Barcelona airport. It's the national Spain holiday, whatever that is, and there's fireworks everywhere. And his nervous system is automatically going to go boom,
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
because he understood what was happening, sat down on the curb outside the, where you wait for taxis, breathed, it passed, went on and had a great weekend. Because he understood what was happening, he understood how it worked. And I've had the same experience because for many years afterwards, the sound of footsteps behind me, when those three men came and beat the crap out of me, the sound of footsteps behind me would set me off. Would set my nervous system off. I could be on Venice Beach in California, beautiful sunny day with my friends, we're playing frisbee, and if like someone jogged past, I'd be like that, and that
Yeah.
stuck with me for probably 10 years. And then, I started understanding how experience works, how the mind creates our experiences, how the role thought plays in all of this, and it went away. And then about 2 years ago, I was walking in the park near where I live, like out for a nice early morning walk, people out walking their dogs and jogging and stuff. And then I was very aware that two men were coming up behind me jogging. They were chatting to each other. It was quite harmless. That they separated and went around me, which is not a nice thing to do to a woman, but they're oblivious. They had no clue, right? They don't know why, right? And they went around me. And here it was 30 years later. And I haven't had any negative memories or anything about this for a very long time. And suddenly my nervous system went boom, like this.
Yeah.
And at first, my first thoughts were, you're a trauma counselor. You shouldn't be like, it's 30 years ago. Like, I shouldn't be reacting. And then I caught myself and I caught my nervous system is now responding to the scary, dangerous thinking I'm having. And I stopped. And I totally stopped and breathed. And like, I'm safe. This is because before I didn't know that I could stop it. Right? So I
Yeah.
stopped, right? And then I had an insight. And insights are so much more powerful than techniques. And I had tons of techniques for years, but I don't use any of them anymore because an insight, which means a shift in your perception, a shift in your understanding, is so much more powerful. And I had this insight. I live in a country now where English is not the first language. So if I was walking in that park and I heard someone speaking with a Manchester accent, I also would have stopped to look around. Why? Because that's part of my history. Being
Mhm.
mugged is part of my history. It's part of my story. But in that moment, it just got filed away. I'm not in denial about it because clearly I'm talking about it now, right? I'm not
Yeah.
scared of it. So what I've learned is it can only hurt me if I'm misunderstanding it. This is funny. When I would tell this story back when it was, those 10 years after it was going on, I'd be crying, you're crying. I could really milk it. I could really tell you some gruesome details about it and we'd both be miserable. But now I can tell the same story from a better mood or better perspective. And I mean, I'm certainly not happy it happened to me, but I'm quite fine right now because my perspective is different. The past didn't change and it didn't need to change. My perspective of it has changed. That to me is freedom. That I'm not a victim of the story anymore.
Right. Yeah. So I definitely agree with you on that, that everything is mindset at the end of the day. But I do want you to walk me through like your process of like what you did because when you went through everything you went through, it's not as simple as just like, okay, yeah, I'm good. I'm just gonna think this way. Like it's gonna take time to actually change your mindset and rewire your brain and have a different perspective. So can you walk me through that?
Yeah, I mean, it didn't really. I wouldn't say it takes time. I mean, there was obviously a journey,
Yes.
right? Because the first 10 years, I didn't know anything about self help or anything like that. So I just struggled on, and I would, keep trying to, get back into life, get some work, working in, different entertainment jobs, and then these things would happen. And then after the third one, after I kind of I went downhill pretty fast, you can imagine after the third one. And eventually I asked for help. And I reached out to a women's crisis center in London. And I remember one of the mentors there, she said to me, was I ready to let go of my story? And at first I was so offended because what I heard, this is not what she said, but what I heard was it didn't happen or it didn't hurt or get over it, right? That's what I heard in my,
Yeah.
because I was in a very low mood, right? I'm in a victim low mood and she's saying that it didn't happen, it didn't hurt, get over it. And I'm like, did you hear what happened to
Yeah, it's like
me?
invalidating your feelings.
Right? And I actually was, my doctor actually sent me to a psychiatrist after the second one And the psychiatrist at the hospital, all she would do is get me to tell the story over again and over again. And I remember thinking, are you deaf? Did you not hear me the first time? Because it's called flooding therapy. They believe that if you tell the story over and over again, then that's going to help. It does not.
Wait,
It does
flooding
not.
therapy?
Flooding
I
therapy. It's
never
what they
heard
do.
that.
They say they don't do it anymore, but they do. There's a belief that if you keep talking about it, like exposure, whatever you want to call it, then
Huh.
that will help. It doesn't, because all it does is keeps the nervous system revved up. Because if you keep remembering horrible memories, how is that possibly going to help? Right? Right. So when this mentor asked me, am I ready to let go of it? At first, I was so offended and angry. And then I paused and I thought, I realized that the events that happened to me had become my identity. I was the girl who'd
Mm-hmm.
been mugged 3 times. And it becomes so much part of my identity. I was living in it so much of the time. The reason it was so threatening to let go of it was because then who am I?
Yeah.
If I let go of this, then you're not going to want to talk to me because I haven't got anything interesting to say because I've spent the last year being miserable, last 10 years being miserable. I'm really good at it. So if I let go of,
Feel that. Oh
right?
my God. I feel that.
So if
Oh my
I
God.
let go of my identity of being the victim, who am I? But thank God I was ready to find out. And I followed her guidance. And then I'd say the next 10 years after that, I did a lot of what you could call self-help work, like a lot of writing, a lot of meditation. And it did help me with the hypervigilance and the building up confidence and being able to go out. But I had chronic pain for
Yeah.
25 years. And whenever I would tell a chiropractor or an osteopath about my pain in my neck and my back, and I tell them what happened, they go, oh, well, that's, you've got 3 herniated discs from where they slammed you on the floor. Of course you're going to have back pain.
Mm-hmm.
But what I know now is all those injuries healed 25 years ago. So why am I still in pain now? It was because I was still reliving and reliving and had this identity going.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I'm now out and about, I'm living in California, I'm working on movies, flying around the world, doing amazing stuff. I was in agony in my back. I had IBS, I had skin issues, I had asthma, I had all kinds of allergies. Physically, I was a mess, but I was getting up and doing it. And then about almost 10 years ago, I came across a new paradigm in psychology and I got so excited about it. I went back to London to do some training. And I trained for about 6 months to become a practitioner. And then all my pain went away. I had a monthly chiropractor appointment for 25 years. No matter wherever I lived, wherever I went, movies, location, got to see the chiropractor because my back would be killing me. I had a walking stick by the time I was 27. I was bent sideways often. I was paralyzed several times.
Gosh.
And now I understand that my body was screaming at me to come back to the moment because I spent so much of my time up in my head
Uh-huh.
reliving events, resentment, self consciousness, insecurity. And I started to understand that I was living in the feeling of this created mess in my head. And as I started to understand that thought is always moving, every thought
Yeah.
we've ever had has moved on. So there's actually nothing to do. That's why I don't use techniques anymore because techniques are like, if you imagine your mind is like Grand Central Station, right?
Mm-hmm.
Thoughts are like trains going in and out all day long. Any kind of technique is like to fix or reframe, our pain or trauma, is like dragging a train back into the station to work out how to make it leave. Well,
Mm-hmm.
it already left. Every thought you've ever had has left. So when I was going through what they would call PTSD, I was like, I was dragging the train back in the station, decorating it, living in it. This is my home because this feels normal, feels familiar. But
Mm-hmm.
really, I was now the one creating my misery. Now, I'm not judging myself for that.
Mm-hmm.
That's the word innocent. I innocently didn't understand. And now that I do, I don't have the back pain and the IBS and all the other stuff anymore either.
Very fascinating because I have a lot of neck pain. But okay, I have like so many questions because as I was listening to you, I was thinking to myself, I'm like, wow, I have every single problem you just said. And if I can follow your advice, I hope I can be healthy and happy.
But you are healthy and happy.
Oh, I know, I'm being a
You
mess
just
right now.
don't
Okay, I'm
think you
sorry.
are.
Okay, yeah. Anyway, oh my goodness. Okay. So, because you were mentioning how, like, if you're constantly talking about trauma, it's like you're reliving it. Because I've heard the same thing from, like, Instagram. I have other people who have Instagram accounts and you talk about it. So, is there like a healthy way of, I mean, right now you are talking about it yourself on this podcast, but for like me with Mentally a Badass, with my brand and with like my Instagram and the reels that I make, my reels are inspired by like my trauma. And I don't do it to like obviously hurt myself, but like I feel like I need to be relatable, for my audience. And so now I'm thinking like, am I like making myself upset? So is it like a healthy way of doing this without like being there for my audience but not screwing myself over?
Yes, because otherwise I'd be miserable right now because I've been thinking about, remembering and just to tell you, and I'm not miserable. I love my life, right? And I've
Hmm.
been that way for many years. So there's an author that I really love. His name's Sydney Banks. And in one of his books, it's called Second Chance. And he says, to go back into the past from a low mood is psychological suicide.
Mm.
From a low mood.
Mm.
That's what to me PTSD is. I'm going back into the past, whether I'm doing it innocently myself or a therapist or someone is encouraging me to do, which they do, which drives me crazy. But um, to go back into the past from a low mood, how can it be a good experience? It's going to be miserable. It's horrible to go, but I can go back into the past from a higher mood, from a better state of consciousness, if you like.
Yeah.
And it's like I'm talking to you about a movie because it's not happening right now. I'm not suffering from it now, and I haven't for decades. But I've worked with clients who, it happened 50 years ago, and there's as if it happened yet this morning because they're still stuck in the reliving it as if it's happening to them now.
Hmm.
Now, again, it's not a judgment; it's an innocent misunderstanding. Could I just tell you a quick story to illustrate this?
Yeah, of course.
A couple of years ago, I had two new clients in 1 week. The first one, she didn't know anything about the work that I do. She'd heard that I was a trauma counselor, and she booked an appointment. So we talked for an hour, and my intuition said to me, I heard it in my head, don't ask her what happened because I don't actually need to know what happened to someone in order to help them, from what I know now, right? So we talked for about an hour. We talked about how the mind works, how experience is created, how we're always feeling our thinking, that she wasn't broken, there was nothing wrong with her. She'd just been experiencing a lot of misunderstanding. And then she called me the next morning and she said, thank you for not asking me what happened. Thank you for not making me tell the story. She said, therapists and psychiatrists have been torturing me. That's her words. Torturing me for the last 10 years, making me tell the story over and over and over again. She said, I slept last night for the first time in years.
Hmm.
Now, we carried on working together and it turned out it was a rape. And the rape, sadly, was by someone that the family knew. So the family weren't supporting her. And that we came to the conclusion that's really where her suffering was coming from. Not that I'm not dismissing the horrendousness of the initial event, but because the family didn't support her, they challenged her version of it, all that kind of stuff. That's where the continued suffering came from. And so reliving it was not helping, and she got free of it. Now, a couple of
Mm.
days later, I had another new client who I'd met once before socially, and she walked in to see me, and she was like bouncing off the walls. She was a complete mess. Like she couldn't keep a thought straight in her head. She was really struggling. And I said, what's going on? And she said, well, my PTSD is really bad today. And this time my intuition got a bit suspicious. And I said, really? Why? What's going on? I'm so sorry. What happened to you? And she goes, well, it's from being single, of course. This woman's in her 40s, and and I can understand, but and for a split second I wanted to smack her. How
Hopefully she's
can
not
you
listening to this.
But for a split second, because how dare you compare being single to being raped or beaten up? Like, excuse me?
I had that face. I was like,
Right. So I still find it a little hard when, like, someone said to me this morning, oh, using that sewing machine was so traumatizing. I'm like, you don't use that word. Anyway, but I want to expand on this because it's
yeah,
really
no,
important.
trauma
It's
gets thrown around a lot.
right. But that's what I want to just dive into for a moment because, say, for a split second, I was really offended that she was calling that trauma PTSD, right? And then I thought about it. This woman was really distressed.
Mm.
So her distress, are we going to have a competition between who's the more distressed? You see, She was as distressed as the woman who'd been raped.
Interesting.
Forget the reason why it happened, because that's going back to that triggered thing, right? Because what triggers, if you're going to use that word, what triggers one person does not trigger another person. I've met people whose their toast has fallen on the floor and that's it. They cannot cope with life for the rest of they're going back to bed, right? Life is disaster. I can't cope. So it's never about the event. It's about my reaction to it.
Yeah.
So going back to that book I was telling you about, she lists all these incredible situations. Like, I'll give you an example. I was on a bus that exploded. We thought it was a terrorist attack.
Wait, what? Sorry, you were on a bus that it was exploded?
Yeah, right. Everybody, I've got tons of them. Don't worry.
We need like
Right?
5 episodes. Like,
Yeah, right. You see, and everybody was screaming, running. There's smoke. The bus was all tilted. The driver got it off to the side of the road, and thank God it wasn't. It was a tire had blown and the engine had blown. But everybody was screaming because they thought, because I could hear people screaming at the back of the bus. Now, some people might never want to get on a bus ever again after that. And it wasn't until years later I was telling this story to someone, it never occurred to me not to get on a bus. It's got nothing to do with the bus. Like,
yeah.
am I going to never get on a bus ever again because of this one horrible incident? Now, if you think that you can never get on another bus, then see, we're feeling our thinking.
Yes.
So I have a client who was raped by her husband and she went through divorce, 2 small children, became a single parent. And the sound of rain on the roof would bring flashbacks back to what happened to her. Horrendous. And as we work together, it's gone away. She is the most amazing person. She got a grant to go to law school because she wanted to become a lawyer so she could help other women in her situation. She just finished law school a couple of years ago. She just finished her, what do they call it, like articles, or when they do a training, and she just took her bar. She just took her bar exams and she passed. She's now a lawyer. I'm so proud of her because I could see her being on the Supreme Court. She's the kind of person who's like, she went through hell because the lawyers and the social workers weren't supporting her. And now she's become a lawyer so she can help other women in that situation. She is no longer a victim. She's not having flashbacks. It's not been easy, but her resilience was there the whole time. We are resilient. We just forget that because we start listening to the yucky thinking, the memories. And we forget that we actually have all the courage and all the strength we need to get through anything.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that just really says, like, we have the power and it's all about choice at the end of the day. It's like, do you want what you went through to define who you are and to predict the rest of your future and pretty much just rob you from any opportunity that comes your way? Or are you going to be resilient and are you going to push through? I mean, right now, like, you're on this podcast and all these, I've have like literally over 100 episodes. That's like over 100 people I've spoken to, right? And it's just beautiful how everybody have made these choices to just not take the high road, not the low road, in a way, right? So I've been itching to ask this question. Can you tell me the difference of reliving versus processing trauma?
No. I mean, not that I won't answer your question. I mean, I don't see this.
I was like, okay, sorry. Ask that because it sounds like you were being mean to me. Oh, you're like, no, I'm not gonna answer your question, Justine. Sorry.
I meant no. I don't.
Let me read. Let's redo this here.
Okay.
Okay, take 2 on that. Okay, I'm gonna ask it differently too. Okay, so they say, like, therapist says that you have to process your trauma to really, heal and get through it and such. But then we're talking about reliving trauma and how if we keep putting ourselves in that position and keep talking about it, then it's going to hurt us in a way. So what do you see a difference when it comes to processing or reliving? Like, is there a difference?
I don't see a difference, no, because the
Mm-hmm.
processing would require, from what I understand what therapists do, would require some reliving of it. So there isn't, I don't really see a difference between the two things. One is innocently done, like I was doing. I was reliving it innocently because I didn't know how. I mean, I can remember screaming at myself to shut up. Shut up, shut up, shut up. And so when I went to the psychiatrist, and it took me 2 panic attacks just to get there, I was in such a bad way. And I remember when she said to me, tell me what happened. And then she said, tell me again. And I was thinking, that's when I thought, is she deaf? Because didn't she hear me the first time? So that was her processing, was getting me to get used to telling the story. And
Yeah.
I would leave, I only went to 2 sessions because I would leave there feeling worse than when I arrived. Because how can you feel good reliving something?
That makes sense. Yeah.
I was hoping she was going to give me, I don't know, techniques or tools or something so that I didn't do that. Because I thought, I sat there thinking, but I do this at home. I'm really good at reliving it. I want you to show me how to not live in that painful state of mind anymore. And she didn't. So I never went back. I went twice, I think. It wasn't
Yeah.
worth the panic attacks just to get there, leaving the house. And so
Yeah.
I kind of pulled myself out by screaming at myself to like, shut up, shut up, shut up, like every time, I'd ruminate. And now it's like if it was funny, a couple of months ago, I tried to upset myself about it. That sounds weird, but like I tried to see if I could think about it and get upset, and I couldn't because in a better mood, I can't upset myself. It's like you can't tickle yourself, right? So if I get upset about it, that means I'm in a low mood. And I've learned that in a low mood, my thinking is completely unreliable. It
Mm-hmm.
is not a good reflection of the past, anything actually, present or future, because it's like
Mm-hmm.
being in the basement with the doors shut and you're in the dark and nobody thinks clearly when they're feeling panicked like that. So I've learned
Yeah.
not to listen to. So when I'm helping people, we do not go into the past. I mean, if they need to tell me what happened because they've never told anyone, that's different. But there's no healing in the past. And if there's nothing broken, then all we have to do is understand. And like I said, insight is so much more powerful than processing and tools and techniques.
Yeah. I feel like it is very complex. So for me personally, like I feel like there's a place for going, like stepping into the past to understand why we act the way we act today. Because, like, for example, like childhood, like whatever, like a lot of things that happen in someone's childhood can reflect on how you are as an adult today and like control with anger and just alcohol or drugs or things like that. So, there's in the mental health world, they always say to talk to somebody. To that it would be, helpful to not just keep it all in. What would you have to say to those that advice that is constantly saying you should, talk to somebody and don't like keep it all to yourself?
Well, I think if someone's carrying around a secret, like say abuse that happened to them as a child, and they've never told anyone, they've never talked about it, I'd say it's very important to talk that out with someone, but someone you feel safe with, someone that isn't going to judge you, someone that isn't going to make it worse in any way,
Hmm.
for sure. But like I know journaling is, for example, is something that people advocate for, getting things out and getting to peace with it. Now this is a gross analogy, but like telling someone the first time is a bit like throwing up. When you're sick, you just gotta that your body's gonna expel it, it's gotta come out. And I think that one time is good. But to keep writing about it, to keep talking about it is like throwing up every day. And throwing up every day is not healthy.
Yeah, that
So
makes sense.
right. So once I've got it out, then what what I help my clients see is that they're actually perpetuating the misery and the discomfort. Because when you understand how thought works, as children, if we were involved in, subject to abuse, the child is innocent. The child doesn't have a part in that. You're
Hmm.
an innocent victim of what happened to you. It should never happen to anybody, and any kind of abuse, or whatever age we are, right? Someone else abusing their power and hurting and just taking away someone's peace of mind like that. It shouldn't happen to anybody. But reliving it now isn't going to make my life better now. And
Hmm.
if I want to improve my relationships with myself, with other people going forward, then understanding how the mind works now, to me, has been a much more freeing way to move forward.
Yeah.
Because I can't change the past. I'm not in denial about it, but reframing it isn't going to change anything. It still happened, right?
Yeah.
So if I now I can still get upset about things today. I still can get hurt feelings or disappointed or whatever. And now I I've learned how it feels. If I find myself going into that kind of dark world, for me, the first thing that happens is I lose my sense of humor. Then I start feeling very intense. Maybe I start feeling pain in my chest or my stomach. Then I start getting very serious. I get really impatient with people. Everybody's an idiot. Leave me alone. I'm isolating, eating chocolate, don't want to talk to anybody, right? So I know myself now. So I don't need to know where that came from and what happened in third grade that made that, all I need to know is right now, oh, I just put my toe on the down escalator. Do I really want to go there? No, I don't. I love my life now.
Mhm.
Why? I was really good at being miserable. I had outfits for it. I could, I'd sound, yeah, like sweats and a bottle of wine. I can remember being like 25, 26, and my friend Linda said she was going to get a bottle of wine on the way home from work and cry in front of the mirror tonight. I said, oh, I thought, that sounds good.
It's
That's where my thinking, right?
the aesthetic these days.
Right. But that's where my thinking was in the toilet when I thought that was a good
Yeah.
idea. I travel around the world now and I'm writing books and I'm, working with people everywhere. And why would I want to throw that away by feeling miserable? Now, but I just want to say that I also can feel miserable and I'm okay with it now. I used to be
Mhm.
scared of it. I used to be scared of it because it was so dark. It would take me into this place like I was going to drown and how am I going to get out of it? Today, I can have some sad feelings. I can even get angry. I can even like get upset about something, but it doesn't frighten me anymore because I know it's going to pass. I'm
Yeah.
just feeling some temporary thinking. Like, if someone steals your purse or scratches your car, like, it's appropriate to get angry. If your dog dies, of course you're going to be sad. And then it passes. I don't have to be frightened of it anymore.
Yeah.
I just want to give you an example. I was out late with a friend and we were walking home through our neighborhood and we're just chatting. And it was about 11 o'clock at night and we're getting close to home. And she's my neighbor. And she said to me, "You're not scared, are you?" I said, "No, should I be? Why?" And I suddenly realized as we were walking home, we were in a completely different mindset. She's from South Africa. She'd experienced a carjacking back before. And she was in her mind going, "What's that? What's that shadow? What's that noise? What's that?" And I'm walking home going like, "Oh, blah, 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 blah," chatting about where we'd been. I thought we were in the same conversation in the same neighborhood going home. And then I realized she was in a completely different experience than I was. That's what I mean by we're all living in our own thought created world. She was terrified walking along. I didn't
Mhm.
even notice. So who was right? Who was wrong? I'd rather be in my mindset now. I don't take risks. I don't, go out into dangerous places anymore. Why would I do that?
Yeah.
But I'm not scared to travel on my own or walk, where I need to go with as
Yeah.
long as I'm taking sensible precautions. Because I don't want to live a life that's I'm looking over my shoulder the whole time.
Absolutely.
I want to go out and live, live as well and as free as I can, which is great.
Yeah. Because fear is like what keeps people back from living life. And it's like, I honestly, if anything were to, let's say something like I've got a scratch on my car, or like, honestly, like there was like I was driving, there was like a little pebble that hit like the corner of my car. And I think the glass broke a little bit, like the outer layer. And I saw it. I'm just like, I was like upset, but I was like, you know what? Whatever, moving on. Like,
Yes,
it's
great.
like, it's just like, why? Because I'm thinking if I'm gonna
Yeah,
do that and be frustrated, I'm just making a choice to piss myself off. Like that's my fault.
exactly. Yeah,
It's like if they like whose fault was it with the pebble? I don't know, Mother Nature, or I'm just driving and a random pedal hit my car. It's like, and I love how we talk so much today about mindset and making choices, because I love talking about that, because it honestly like and honestly I have to I need to work on myself with having reactions when I see people. I get frustrated with people when they blame everything out like externally about their life versus in like never blaming themselves and having any type of accountability. So I personally have to work on like not feeling annoyed by that.
so rather than work on yourself, how about if you just saw their their innocence,
Okay. So
right? Because
like,
this was a powerful one for me. I started to see. There's this phrase: "Everybody's doing the best they can," right? My
yeah,
mother would say that, and I'd be like, "Really? That's pathetic." That's the best you can do. Anyway, but there's an end to that sentence. It goes, "Everybody's doing the best they can with the thinking they have in that moment,"
powerful,
right?
perfect.
So when
Put
you
that on the
see,
board.
right, that improved my relationships with other people more than any technique or self-help book I'd ever read. Because I suddenly felt compassion for people who in the past, see, I just didn't think happy people were stupid.
Wait, you thought happy people were stupid?
Yeah, because if you really knew how much pain I'm in, what pain goes on in the world, you would not be happy. That was kind of like my old mindset, right? I couldn't tolerate people who were like, so I want to smack.
That would be a nice teaser. Just put it right in the beginning. Happy people are stupid. I want to smack them.
Right,
People be like, "What is this episode about?" Honestly, it
right.
would drive people.
But what I see now is that everybody's at where they're at, their level of consciousness, their state of mind. And we can only operate at that state that we're in. So if someone's in a low mood, or they're in a misunderstanding, or they're in a state of anger, or whatever it is, or ignorance, right? You can only operate from where you're at. So when I was, you know, punching the wall, not eating or sleeping properly, and absolutely miserable, not wanting to leave the house, that was the best I could do with that thinking. Now I do a lot better because the quality of my thinking is better. So I'm able to have clarity to, I like, now I am forgiveness. I am gratitude. I don't have to work at it. That's who we are when we're in a better state of mind. My sense of humor is here. I'm flexible. I'm open minded. That's what human beings are like when they're in their best mood.
Yeah.
And I would go as far to say as that the men that beat me were doing the best they could with the really crappy thinking they were having that day. Now, it's not an excuse. I'm not
No, I know.
excusing what they did, right? I believe that they should have gone to jail, right? What I'm doing is I'm explaining how is it people can do such terrible things, right?
Yeah.
Because at some level, it made sense to them to attack a woman on the street,
Yeah. Can
right?
understand, but I can understand what you're saying. Yeah.
It doesn't make sense to me, right? It
Mhm.
made sense to that policeman to say to me, "You're not important. We got better things to deal with." It made sense
Mm,
because, right? And it makes
yes.
when if someone says to you, "I love you. You're gorgeous." That's making sense to them to say that at that moment. See, there are no exceptions. We can only operate. I think there's an Einstein quote which says, "You cannot fix a problem at the same level of consciousness that created it."
Yeah.
Right? So it's the same kind of thing. We can only operate at the level of consciousness we're at, the state of mind or mood that we're at. So
Yeah.
that's another reason why I'm not scared to be in a low mood anymore because I know it's temporary. But why would I want to go there? I
Yeah.
like being in a better mood. It's so much easier.
Yeah, and I think this actually goes to like how I think it's like you can't expect everybody to think the way you think.
Yes,
It's so
exactly.
powerful. And because I see like this example I'm going to use is I feel like I bring this up in like every episode because it's just something that personally upsets me is when people shame other people if they're not doing what they do. So like, okay, let me give you an example here. So I'm trying to think of one that's not gonna like turn into a whole controversy. So okay, well, this is recent, but it's I'm trying to see like right now it's obviously new, so it makes sense for people like sharing it and donating and this like the LA fire, like that makes sense. But let's talk about like stuff that goes on like outside of the US that we literally like here in the US we can't really do anything, right? But we keep sharing the news from like the comfort of our own home. So there was this one person that I know that literally shares every single day like tragedies that's going on outside. And at the end of the day, there's gonna be a tragedy every day somewhere in this world, right? But like I don't like when people share every single day. But it's like it's not doing anything. You're just sharing negative news. And it's just like I don't follow those people, right? But then it's like, oh, fine, it's your social media. Do whatever you want. I'm gonna unfollow. It's not for me. But what irks me is when I saw this person post a story saying, "Oh, must be nice sitting in your home while these people are dying," and it's like, why are you shaming people for not wanting to be like you and every day share these events? Because one, I don't know what the heck is this supposed to do. Like, are you going there and helping? Are you donating? Like, I mean, I don't know. I'm not obviously in her world like with her, so I don't know, but like what can you do, and it's like awareness is important, I believe in that, but if you're it's kind of like the whole reliving thing in a way, like as you were saying, like just concept wise, it's like okay, it's important to you want to be aware of things, right? But it's the constant every single day, it's like you're just putting you're doing worse than positive, and I think these people with their way of thinking, they're not thinking that. Like for me, I'm thinking, I'm like, you're just spreading negativity. I don't see you being that great of a person if you're all you're doing is just like that's the way I'm perceiving it. Is that you're just sharing negativity. This is not helpful. And then like I said, what really threw me off was when like, okay, there's like I said, there's one thing of you doing what you want to do, but expecting other people to do the same thing. It's like, and just like assuming that like if you're not sharing every little bad thing that goes on in the world, or like it's like you're a shitty person. It's like because we are so privileged, and it's like, and like what I say a lot too is that I believe we have to first work on ourselves internally, and then we can from there, when we're good with ourselves, then we can help people like family and friends, open community. And then it's like, then if you have the ability, let's say if you have the power of like with money and donate or take a trip out there, like yeah. But it's just like for people who are just, let's say like me, I don't have that kind of privilege of like, oh yeah, we do this and this and this. I don't want to feel like I'm shamed. All I can really do is share on my Instagram, but like why would I want to, that's not what I
Well,
want to be doing.
and there's I think there's two things there. One is this person is doing the best they can with the thinking they have in that moment. So on some level, it makes sense to them to keep talking about negative news
Mm-hmm.
and shaming people or whatever they're up to, right? So because like you, I used to think if people didn't do it my way or agree with me, then either they were stupid or wrong.
Mm.
And now I see it's just different.
Yeah.
She has a different perspective than I do,
Mm-hmm.
and so I have a choice whether I listen to it or not, right?
Yeah.
So that's one part of it because you can switch it off. The other
Mm-hmm.
part is that if it's aggravating you or frustrating you, whatever it is, that's coming from your thinking about her and the podcast or her social media. She
Mm-hmm.
cannot make you feel anything.
Can't make me feel anything? What do you mean?
No. Remember how I was talking earlier about we were talking about triggered and how if two
Oh,
people are watching a movie, each person's going to have their own experience of the movie, right? One's going to
yes.
enjoy it, one's going to be looking up the cast members and googling where it was filmed, and somebody else is like already on to the next thing. So we're all having our thought created experience. The reaction you're having to this person's social media output is is coming from your thinking about their social media output because she can't get in your head. Your
Mm-hmm.
superpower is that no one can get inside your head except you. No
Mm-hmm.
one. Not me, not your
Yeah.
mom, not
Makes
her,
sense.
right? Not the news people, the president. Nobody can get inside your head except you.
Mm-hmm.
So whether I'm thinking about tragic things that happened to me in the past or I'm thinking about the future, good or bad, it's all happening in my head right now. The event itself is like, I have no idea what reality is. That's way above my pay grade, right? But I know that my thinking is a poor translation of what I think reality is.
Yeah.
Because, like, you and I are in this conversation right now, I bet you we're having different experiences of it just because the nature of, not because we're in different locations or, different ages or cultures or anything. It's just that's the nature of human beings. When someone says, I know how you feel, no, they don't. Nobody can know how somebody else feels. You can imagine.
Yeah, that's why I like said that. I was like, wait, I'm never gonna know how you actually felt when you got mugged. That's why I was like, okay, let me never say that I know because I don't.
Yeah, yeah. It's the most ridiculous thing when people say, I know how
Maybe
you
just
feel.
saying pain. I know pain. Okay, whatever. Sorry. Go on.
No, yeah, you're right. Because we can never know how anybody else feels, good or bad. And it's not that we are not caring. Uh, you can sympathize, you can say, if you need to say something, I went through something similar. But this person that you're describing, she cannot get inside your head unless you think about her.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're absolutely right.
Usually. No, I'm kidding.
And I'm just gonna put
So you
everything
walked into
together.
that one.
This is hilarious. Okay, so I want to know about two things. One, your book Beyond the Diagnosis, and your membership. I was looking at it a little bit last night. It's very fascinating. So let's start with your book. What is it about?
Yes, so Beyond Diagnosis is a textbook. It's my fourth book. I have three other books before that. The other three are novels. I found stories are a really good way to get this kind of information out to people because then people can follow the characters who are suffering, falling down, searching, finding truth, and getting well. So the first book was about trauma. The second one is about the chronic pain journey. I mean, they're not biographies. I have alter egos that the characters do these, the journeys.
Yeah.
And the third one was about hormones. It's a hormone adventure novel. It's like PMDD and postpartum and hormone things, and everybody in whatever their situations, they get well. So
Yeah.
after I was writing these books, I suddenly had an idea that I know a lot of people, like my clients, my colleagues' clients, who have gotten well from every kind of mental health diagnosis you can think of, right? And I thought, wouldn't it be great to collect all those stories and put them in a book or on a website, like have a resource. So
Yeah.
I put the word out to my colleagues and clients to collect these stories. And in the book, there are 62 recovery stories from everything from psychosis and schizophrenia to bulimia, OCD, ADHD, autism, CPTSD, and PTSD, right? I've got
Mhm.
soldiers, battered wives, I mean, in the trauma section. And each, I've kind of divided them into sections like eating disorders, trauma, child and adolescent ones, neurodiversity. And at the beginning of each of those sections, I've interviewed a mental health professional who comes from the same way of coaching that I am. And, asking these people are MDs and PhDs who've got clinical practice of like between 20 and 50 years of experience helping people. There were, and everybody in the book has gotten well. And when I say
Wow.
gotten well and recovered, I mean off medications, not needing treatment. They're not journaling or meditating. It's like they're out there living their lives. They haven't got time for all that stuff anymore because they're out living
Mhm.
amazing lives. And I've told people about this book, and they go, "Oh, that's not possible." Well, I mean, I've got I've got them all here. They
Like,
well,
you wanna talk with them?
you can't recover from psychosis. I'm like, well, you can, and people do, right?
Yeah.
Right. So all of these, just to sum it up, I would say all of these mental health disorders, you could name any mental health diagnosis. I guarantee you it started with prolonged stressful thinking, right? And whether this, so let's say you're in prolonged stressful thinking, you're dysregulating your nervous system, you're getting upset, your relationships are being affected. Some people eat too much, some people don't eat enough. Some people are drinking and using, some people are cutting themselves, some people are flipping out into alternate universes. They're all coping mechanisms with this innocent misunderstanding of how the mind works. So that's what the book is about.
That's great. Where can they find it?
On Amazon.
Okay. That's cool.
And
I'm
all my,
gonna
all
actually, I
my
think I'm gonna take a look at it myself. That sounds
yeah, all the
interesting.
books are on Amazon. Just look at my name and
Yeah. No, yeah, that sounds super interesting. So, let's get into, like, what is your membership offer?
yes. So like I said, I coach people one on one, uh, from all over the world, but sometimes that isn't financially possible for some people. So I came up with a kind of a way to support people, and in the membership, it's a monthly fee. It's only $25, and
Mhm.
for that $25, I do 3 live coaching sessions a week. So that's 12. I'm not good at math. So that's 12 a month, which comes out something like $3 a session, which is incredible. I'm
Mhm.
an idiot for I should charge more.
You're not an idiot. I'm catching you now.
You're right. So it's on Sunday, Monday, and Thursday, these coaching sessions. There are different times for different time zones. And the Monday one is a book club. We've just started
Mhm.
reading a book called The Secret to Mental Health, which is by one of my teachers. His name's Dr. George Pransky. And so we've only just started this. We're in still in the first chapter. So we read, I read it and we discuss it. It's like we chat, however much people want to talk about the topics and then carry on. And then the Monday session, we're actually going through this book, reading it bit by bit. And on the Thursday session, there could be a Q&A. I might have a topic. But I also have guest speakers every month. So people who've either my colleagues or people who've had great recovery stories, and I also do coaching demos. So someone might volunteer to be coached in front of the group, and so which I think is incredibly brave. And then we get to ask them questions. And then it's all there's a forum. So if you miss any of the sessions, the recordings are always posted, and then I post like thought for the day videos and blogs and other resources as well, and people can post themselves, and so they can post questions and get support that way. So I think it's an incredibly amazing deal, and
Yeah.
it's mostly women. There's a few guys in the group, or the guys are welcome, and it's incredibly supportive, and everybody gets a chance to speak and show up, and it's and we share our stories and get to know each other, and it's really, I think, a really wonderful place for support and hearing a new perspective on how we can. None of us are broken, and we don't need fixing. And when you keep hearing that, you're like, well, she got well and she has the same problem as me, and like, wow, maybe well, watching people get well in the group even,
Yeah. It's proof. That's the most important thing. It's proving that things are possible, because saying that you can't heal from something that's just your brain lying to you.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so I'm gonna put your website in the description. That sounds like really cool with the whole membership and everything. Could be definitely be beneficial for people to, feel supported when during like, with their mental health journey. But Hannah, I want to thank you so much for coming on today and providing
Pleasure.
all of your wisdom. Really appreciate you.
You're very welcome. I've enjoyed it. Thank you.